I'm very interested in conversions, how people go from dark to light, how people go from boy to man, girl to woman, non-Christian Christian. I mean, whatever the paradigm shift is. What is the thing that rolled you over and made you the person you are today? Today, we're blessed with a friend of mine, Jared Spencer, with Spencer Real Estate. And so I'm going to read you a little bit about Jared so we can understand better his conversion. Jared was born to two military members. That had to be tough. Jared found in his early life of two random locations that parents working for the government was not necessarily the easiest childhood. Graduating high school outside of San Antonio, attending Lamar University in Beaumont, Jared received his BFA. Then he went straight to car sales, well, wouldn't you? And within a few years became a top producer in the state, GSM of a multi-franchise dealership that was over in Mid-County. After a decade of doing that, he gave all that up, started a real estate brokerage, like you said, is called Spencer Real Estate. They specialize in investor portfolios. So his goal is to lead a life of success to significance. All right, Jared, so there it is. We've set it up, and if you don't mind, could you regale us the before? Who were you before? What happened? How did it change? And then how are you better for it? What can we learn from your paradigm shift?
You know, with stating, both my parents retired from the Air Force. I think it makes it easiest to understand that I come from a broken home. You know, my mother and father split when I was young. We were living overseas. Actually, we were living in Italy at the time. I had a lot of privilege in life. You know, everything that I knew and everybody I knew was military, somewhat related to the military. So everyone that I knew traveled. Everyone that I knew didn't really have a home to call home. It was wherever we were at.
So you were the epitome of a Rolling Stone.
Absolutely. You know, it's, we make jokes and everybody says, oh, he's a military brat. You only understand that if you've lived the life.
Yeah.
To say it to someone else because you think you understand, you don't really. Until you've lived the life, until you don't have that home base. The joke is we pick up accents. We try to adapt to whatever place we're in,
really?
The people we're in. The food is a big deal. You know, if you understand a culture on how they sit down and eat, you can adapt really, really well and make friends. So what molded me in my life was, I come from a split home. You know, my dad was security forces. We had bomb squad, drug dogs, attack dogs, and as having that you become very alpha male-ish. You're very, very alpha male-ish.
Maybe you're born to be an alpha male.
But it's I'm not an alpha male myself, but I wouldn't consider myself in that. But I do take that strong leadership. But I don't have to have that leadership.
Yeah.
I don't have to have the recognition. I don't have to be the biggest and toughest person in the room.
Right.
I understand that, but I can usually control the alpha without them understanding. That's a little different.
Right.
But that comes from being taught and being put in those environments and learning how to adapt.
Right.
Now, when we say that because that segues into how my faith becomes so strong. My father lived in Italy as an alpha male when the dollar was really, really strong. So he had disposable money. The lira was weak in those years. So we had fancy cars. We had all those extra things and my toys and guitars and all that kind of stuff. And the ego builds in a man.
Yeah.
Which is not good for a relationship.
Right. You get out of balance.
Out of balance and, that dominance. And so it led to the divorce between my mom and my dad.
I didn't ask what your parents' name.
My dad's dad's name is Jerry, and my mother's name is Consuelo.
Consuela.
So she was young, 17 when she joined the military. She probably weighed 90 pounds,
right.
soaking wet,
Tiny.
going into a male-driven society in the late 70s. So it was tough for her. And then you go to Italy, and then you marry. They weren't in Italy when they're married, but married to an alpha male kind of thing. And you're trying to be dominant as a military to earn respect, which led to a divorce. And the scary thing
How
is...
many kids came out of that?
So really it was just me from my parents. I had a half-sister, Isela, who's my daughter's namesake. She was about 4 years older than I was. But my mother left, come to the States. We didn't have social media. We didn't have easy ways of contact, traveling and whatnot. And my mother just kind of...
Oregon.
No, my mother ended up being in Oregon, but she went to California. My dad came stateside. I got dropped off in Pennsylvania to my dad's parents, or my dad's father, because he come from a broken home as well.
Classic Rolling Stone.
Classic. I mean, it's the country of divorcees, right?
Right.
But my mother left. Last I heard last I saw her was 4.5, and the last I heard from her was on my 5th birthday, and. My dad just said, your mother left you. That kind of situation, that you're such a wild kid, she couldn't handle you.
It's your fault.
It was somewhat, because my fault kind of thing. And part of that was probably because he didn't want to take ownership of it.
That's the worst.
But so 6 months later, he's married again.
Right.
Now, he wasn't cheating, anything like that. He just come back, bring up this woman, and ended up getting married. And that woman raised me. That was my stepmother, Natalie. So I had a lot of bitterness. What child wouldn't have that,
right,
when you think that your mother left?
That's
so I grew up with that anger. I grew up with
tough.
that. And then not knowing and not understanding, not knowing the why, that creates a lot of things, because the why is so important.
It is.
And so we get into this, how I found my understanding and my forgiveness and faith. I was 18 years old. My father, he did 35 countries his last 5 years of active duty, and 2 of those were when I was leaving the home. And he wasn't there. He was always traveling. He's TDY. He spent a year remote in Korea. So we butted heads pretty often because we were very, very much alike. Very headstrong, dominating people. And when I left home, we wasn't on the best terms. And I come back for Christmas. I'm just barely 18 years old. Come back for Christmas, and there was a letter waiting in my room, unopened, and it was actually from my grandfather, my dad's dad, and my sister that I mentioned, Isela. She was getting married, and she wanted me to be there. So she found out my granddad's address, because that stayed the same after all these years, and she mailed him a letter, and he forwarded it along to my house and wrote a little note, and unfortunately, it had been in my room since August, and this was now Christmas and December period, 24th. So I missed the wedding. But it gave me a way and information to contact. And so I was able to, I went back to my home in Beaumont, or house, the dorms in Beaumont, and I called the number up, and it happened to be for my mother. Now, I wasn't getting in contact with my mother to be reacquainted with my mother. I wanted my sister.
She was the villain in your mind.
She was. There's nothing that you can say about abandoning your kid that I would take and forgive.
Right.
But what really this led into was the understanding that there are 3 sides to every story. And this is where forgiveness comes into play, and understanding that there's 3 sides to a story, and every single one can be true. Because after meeting back with my mom, getting her side and her version of events, I then accosted my father to get his side and his version of events, and they were different. And so I didn't know which one to believe.
But this, you didn't even know it at the time, but this actually began sort of you were beginning your paradigm shift as you were getting this new information.
Oh, absolutely. I was an angry teenager. I mean, I was just mad at the world, at the situation, mad at all people kind of thing. But that shift was when I didn't know who was telling the truth. Why would either party lie? Who could I trust? But then I understood that both sides were accurate. They were seen from their perspective. Their perspective is what they see it. It's their truth. It's their reality, whether they're lying to themselves, or just not understanding someone else's variation. So I realized at that point there's three sides, because their perspective is true.
Mom's side,
Dad's side, and what really happened from
the rest of the story.
And what really happened from a non-biased point of view.
Yeah.
And so that led me down the path of understanding forgiveness, because I could hold that grudge in. There was definitely a reason I could have held it in, kept that grudge against both parties, and it would have it eats people up on the inside.
Right.
You live with that turmoil.
The anger burns you down from the inside.
And it's not good. It exudes. It comes out of your pores.
It does.
You see it in your everyday life.
And you hurt other people with it.
And so it was that point that I learned that forgiveness matters.
Forgiveness matters.
I can't change the past.
That's a bumper sticker.
There you go. And I can't change the past. So I can't change what happened. All I can change is what goes forward. So look to the future.
Don't trip on what's behind you.
No use crying over spilled milk. It's that old adage.
You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube.
So at that point, I said, if you're going to forgive, you forgive, right? Forgiveness is not 20%. It's not 30%. You either forgive or you don't. And so I forgave. And my life changed. It's just all of a sudden light switch, someone turned on the faucet. It completely changed at that point, and I found forgiveness in my heart.
So forgiveness was your paradigm shift.
That forgiveness was.
But you had more information. You had an overview of the story with more information.
It certainly made things easy, because I realized that I wasn't left out of malice. She knew that my father would make sure I was taken care of, and they wouldn't have that fight between them, or the dangers that potentially could arise from two military trained people.
So you never even thought about the fact that maybe it was for the best.
Well, but that's what she understood. She knew that if she left, she took my older sister, and no hide nor hair from her, he wouldn't come after her or cause other problems. And look, there's always more to it, but that's the gist of it. But when my mother came back to my life, it took some work. The joke between a Hispanic family we make is there's two things a Hispanic family does. That's drink and multiply. There's a lot of us. Okay, there's a whole bunch within that family. And when I went up there,
drink and multiply. There's sometimes at the same time.
You know what? Sometimes you have to be, or else we can't all be together. But what I found out is that whole side of the family knew me. They knew I was coming up. They knew of me. They knew me through the years. Because what I didn't know was my dad's stepmother, my granddad, who sent me forwarded that letter, had been sending pictures of me throughout the years to my mom's mom. And so the family knew of me. They saw pictures. I was up on the wall. School photos. Those bad school photos you have, the 8x10s.
Right.
They had those.
So how did that make you feel?
And it made me feel like I was thought of.
Or just abandoned.
I wasn't just abandoned. I didn't realize it, but they knew the whole time. And my mother had that guilt. That guilt weighed on her, and she was able to get rid of it. She was able to get rid of that. You're still going to lament it.
Right.
But forgiveness and faith transpire. Now, fast forward a few years, I we graduated college. I started up in the automotive business, and I started selling cars. Became really good at it. I was selling Hondas. Became really good in, and we were one of the top in the nation. And
this is in Mid-County.
And this is in Mid-County, really a Port Arthur address. And I did that for a few years. We're sending video messages on the phone back in the day, circa 2006. And the longest video message you could send was 1 minute 5 seconds. So I learned how to say, my intro, demo the car, and them to get hold of me. I sold a lot of cars because of that.
Yeah,
I did. It took me to...
What made you go to selling cars? Where did that come?
Oh, such a great question. So I graduated college. I had planned to teach collegiately, and I was abroad. I was in Italy, and I got an email from a friend and said, hey, I've got a girl you should meet. Where are you at? And I said, Rome. And she thought I meant Rome, Texas. And this was Yahoo Messenger kind of thing, email or messaging back and forth. And I said, no, I'm in Rome. As if, Rome was a duh. I should just could have just said Italy. She, oh, when are you coming back? And I said, I'm not. I wasn't planning on coming back to the States for some time. I had an offer to go to China to study ceramics, and then to upstate New York. And she said, well, I have this girl I really think you would like. I want to set up, described a little bit about her. Well, I ended up making a hop back to the States. And
don't tell me this is your wife.
It is. It ended up being my wife. So Summer Leidick, she's an artist. She lives out in Houston now. She's the one that set us up on a blind date. Came back for a brief hop and set up on a blind date, and I ended up not leaving. And, we've been, almost 18 years later.
Yeah.
So
that girl must have been fine, baby.
It's so it was worth staying.
Okay.
So I passed that up, but I had to get a job. So I did, I answered a paper, an ad in a paper, and it happened to be for car sales. I do that, and I started selling cars, started becoming successful. A few years down the road, then I took over a manager's position, and then I ended up managing multiple departments, and then I took over GSM, general sales manager position for 3 franchises and 2 used car stores at one time by 28 years old.
So you're working your butt off.
I was, a hard worker. That's just look, sales, work, understand complexity of people, and we did that quite well. But to get to that level, you're spending a lot of time.
A lot of time.
And I had 2 young kids, and so after,
even when you're not at work, you're at work.
That's right. Your day off is not really your day off. And my wife was a single mother. That's basically what she was, because I was working 70, 80 hours a week.
Damn.
But the pay was phenomenal.
Yeah.
The pay was phenomenal.
Right.
And so car guys get in a crux, because when you're at that level, it's kind of hard to make that kind of money doing anything else. But you give your life to it. And so many guys in that upper echelon of the dealer world, they're divorced. They're estranged from their kids. They have...
in debt.
Well, they got a bunch of expensive things, and they don't have things to show for it. They don't have those assets.
Right.
And they're estranged from their kids, or the substance abuse issues.
Right.
Whether it's some sort of narcotic or alcohol. They've got those problems. And that's not the life I wanted to live. That's not the way I wanted my wife or my marriage to be, or my kids down the road. I wanted to watch them grow up. So I had switched dealerships, took over a portion of that, and I gave them a finite amount of time, and ended up I cut that in half. I had one of my buddies basically said, come sell my houses at auction one night when I was griping about hours. And he said, why don't you buy a brokerage, buy real estate, and come sell all this. And I was like, man, that's a great idea. And what I realized was I needed to make that change. And it was at that moment, at that night, that I said what I was going to do. Now, I go home. Next night, I tell my wife, I think I'm going to get out of the car business. I'm going to get my real estate license.
This is actually another sort of paradigm shift.
This leads to my biggest portion of what faith means. And I go home, I tell my wife that I'm going to get my real estate license. And she said, okay. This was 8:30 when I got home. Nothing else was said. And the next night, I come home, 8:30, sit down at the dining room table. She takes my plate out of the microwave with the paper towel over it, so that way it's still somewhat warm, and I take my shoes off. And she said, babe, I looked up what an average real estate agent makes, and I don't think that's going to work. Oh, you can get it, right? You know? And I asked her, did you look up what an average car salesman makes? And she said, no. And that was the end of the conversation. Next night, same thing happens, 8:30, come home, or almost like it was 9 o'clock. And she said, I looked up what an average car salesman makes, and I think we'll be just fine.
Yeah.
And that was my okay.
There it was.
I started transitioning at that point, and I quit a very, very lucrative job. Not on fact, not on knowledge, but on faith. I believed God will take care of me. God will lead me down the path. God wouldn't have put this idea in my mind if I didn't have the opportunity.
He was concerned about your family as well.
He was. And, you hear that when you need to learn patience, God doesn't just give you patience. He gives you the tasks and the steps and the issues to learn patience on your own. That's the way he's teaching you patience.
He sends you to school.
That's right. And I learned forgiveness. Maybe the situations that happened in my childhood, those problems, was my schooling to understand forgiveness.
See, now that is a good silver lining. If you can take the bad things and turn them to good, to me, that means God's inside of you. That means God is working in you to take the bad. Because, I mean, look what he did. He took the worst possible situation, and he's going to restore it to glory.
It pushed me to not want my kids to deal with divorce. He taught me the forgiveness. But forgiveness isn't faith. Forgiveness is a point of understanding. It's moving forward. But the faith aspect is a little bit different, because if you know, that's not faith. If you have proof, it's not faith. If you have a guarantee, that's not faith. Faith is doing something without any of those premises, with the blind motion forward that it'll be okay. And I burned the boats. That's my adage. You know, my buddy said I could always go back to the dealer world. I said, nope, I burned the boats. And he said, I love that phrase, because there wasn't a going back. Because if you know that you can always go back, are you really giving it 100%?
Yeah, you may not.
And there was no going back, but because I knew I wasn't going to fail. And when we did really well in the real estate world, so much so I was able to open up my own brokerage. Just after a lot of tragedy, I alluded that my stepmother really raising me. She was tragically killed in a car accident. My father followed her 4 months later. That sister for my father, that I bought her a house 4 minutes away from my house, and she relocated her from Austin, told her she didn't have to work for, and then she ended up tragically a year after relocating here.
How long after your dad?
It was a year and a month, or a year and a couple months.
That's like bam, bam.
And she had
your real mom is still.
My real mom, yeah. So we've got a great relationship, with my oldest sisters as well, and then a multitude of family members, and but it's really based on faith. Sometimes you just have to forgive, go forward, and understand that. Lemons aren't necessarily always bad. You can always make that lemonade.
That's right.
And have that faith.
God made them on purpose.
Yeah.
So your paradigm then is faith.
Yeah, paradigm has been faith, and I basically do everything based on that. Know that I've been given the skills, the knowledge, and we talk, we pray, we contemplate, and God's put a few things in my path that assures me, lets me know faith is the right thing to do. So when I hear the voice and that idea, we go forward.
So you hear an audible voice? I'm kidding.
I think it's a direction. Sometimes things just look differently.
It's gut.
It's inherent. The direction lights up. So to speak. It's like that's the right path. Let's do that.
You know what I found amazing too is talking about faith and the voice. Right? Yeah, I don't hear audible voices. At least not yet.
If you build it, they will come.
They will come. So I did just hear. But what I found that either. If I'm working on a problem, I can just open that Bible in a random way and start reading, and literally it addresses the thing that that has happened so many times. But that's faith too, knowing that there's an answer, and then opening the book to find it. Okay, so faith. All right, I like that. There it is. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely.
Appreciate you.
Thanks for having me on.